Thanks for joining us today at Flatirons, where we seek to bring the awesome life of Christ to a lost and broken world. If you ever have any questions or you want to learn more about us, visit us at our website, flatironschurch.com. To stay connected with us throughout the week, follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Today, Ben Foot joins our teaching team, and he takes a look at love, joy, and peace, and the fact that growth in those areas takes time. We're glad you're here, and welcome to the second week in our series, Tree of Life.
That's so good. So, you know how songs can bring back memories? You know, so whenever I hear that Jimmy Eat World song, 12 years ago I ran a marathon and it was on my playlist. So when I heard that song, I immediately want to fall on the ground and vomit right now. So it's my one and only marathon. Hey, today's going to be great. Today, our teacher's going to be Ben Foot. And if you've ever, that's his mom right there. There's his other, so let me kind of tell you how today came about and kind of what the future looks like around here. So about 18 months ago, I was over in Africa with a men's group, and we were in Nairobi, and one of my favorite churches there is Mavuno Church. And we were sitting there, and the pastor was actually explaining their values, and one of their values is to always invest in the next generation. And I remember leaning over to Paul Bruner, our executive pastor, who was sitting beside me, and I went, you know, we have our values at Flatirons, but that should be like a sub-value under all of our values. So we're running after God's word, and we need to be invested in the next level generation to teach God's word. And all the way down there is that we're teaching those things because eventually, we old people, all right, and I say that for 30 and above, shut up. We're gonna hand everything over to them, and that's a heavy responsibility unless they're prepared for it. And so here's the irony. So about last summer, Ben was up here with several young teachers, and they were teaching through the series Wrestling with God about his own story. And then he came up another time and taught, and the several hundred emails I got, you kind of like him. And so and then this past week I was on retreat. I do a retreat with two other pastors, one from Kenya and one from Mexico City. And I was down in Mexico City all week, and I didn't know how the retreat was going to go. And just so you know, every time I come back from a retreat, I cry. So get ready. And but the retreat's kind of evolved into, how am I going to spend the second half of my life? And I just had actual clarity down there in Mexico City last week that I want to spend the second half of my life investing in people in the first half of their life, because eventually they're going to lead the church, and they're going to lead families, and they're going to lead that. And so I think I can't do anything better with my life. And so Scott and I were talking about that a few weeks ago, and our eyes and our hearts went towards Ben because he's just really, really, really gifted. He also is married to my daughter, and he makes wonderful grandchildren. And it's just awesome. I'm really, really, really proud of him. Scott and I got together and we talked to our elders. And so from now on, Ben is going to be a part of our teaching team now, and he's going to be on a regular rotation. Here's the other part. Some of you going, who's Ben? Just wait, okay? Because you're going to see God's hand on him here in just a minute. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to pray. He's a little nervous. He just looked at me and goes, I think I'm going to get a bloody nose. And if he does, ignore it, okay? Ignore that whole thing there. And Here's the other thing I love about Ben. I don't get to preach, so I'm going to give you all I got right now, right? Ben just went on ADD meds, just like me. And I raised my daughter, and she thought, I'm out of the house. And then she married Ben. And it's just so wonderful. And God's so funny. Anyway, let's pray, and then let's welcome Ben, okay? So God, I thank you for what you're doing in this church and in those of us you've entrusted so much to, and then you look at us and say, now, teach those and lead those and entrust and prepare those that come behind you. And so, God, I just pray your hand would be on Ben like it was last night in here. And he's not going to wade in. He's going to jump in the deep end of the pool. And he's going to give us really, really big truth, and he's going to follow it with really big grace. And so help us open our hearts. Whether we know Ben or not, or we know Jim or Scott or whatever, it doesn't matter. Will you teach us about Jesus through your servant Ben? It's in his name I pray. Amen. Will you welcome Ben?
Well, hi. All that is true. I have to drink water all the time now because of this medicine, and I drink just like Jim now, which is where you're talking really fast, and then all of a sudden you just go, and then you go back to it. It's terrible. And the bloody nose thing is true. I looked over, I'm like, I really think I'm like about to get a bloody nose. And he like laughed. I'm like, what do I do? He goes, just do. So I just have this. And I'll use it if I have to. Please, God, don't give me a bloody nose. So let's just jump into this. So last weekend, Jim set this series up for us that we're calling Tree of Life, all right? And in case you missed last weekend or you need reminded, I'll quickly catch you up to speed, all right? So after understanding more about the real Jesus in our series BYOJ, after understanding more about the real Jesus, we're going to answer a question, and the question is this: what would life begin to look like if we were rooted in the real Jesus? That's what we're trying to figure out in this series. So now that we understand that Jesus maybe isn't the person that maybe some of us grew up with, at least I grew up with this version of Jesus, that like whiny, passive-aggressive in a bathrobe, and he's like, be nice to people for me, like that version of Jesus, once we realize he's sovereign and he's king, well, if we root our lives in the real Jesus, which means if we put our faith in him, if we put all the chips on his table, go all in, then what changes? What happens in our life? What grows? Relationally and spiritually and emotionally, what changes? And that's a good question, because if everyone's being honest, then probably the room's split in half. Half of us are like, yeah, I don't know what changes, that's why I'm here. And then the other half would be like, I think I know, like there's a verse about it somewhere. Like we don't know. Like what are we supposed to become? Are we supposed to become the kinds of people who just watch G-rated movies all the time, you know? And are we supposed to become, we put the fish on our car, you know? Is that what we're supposed to do? Are we supposed to wear aggressively corny Christian t-shirts now, right? Like the shirts where your friend looks at you and like, why are you wearing that shirt? And you're like, it just looks like a Reese's wrapper, but it says Jesus instead of Reese's. I don't know. Grandma got it for me. I'm wearing it. I don't know. He's a tasty delight. I have no idea. What is our change supposed to look like? What is it supposed to look like? Is it deeper and better than that? Is it more fundamental? And it is. And that's what we're walking through. So Jesus said that you'll recognize his people by their fruit, all right? And his people are Christians. His people are the people in the room who have said, I put my faith and all of my life in you. All right, so he says that you'll recognize his people, those people, by their fruit. So in the same way that, like, I'm no green thumb, but if I went up to a tree and there's an apple that wasn't glued, it's attached, and I pull it off, I'm like, this is an apple tree. In the same way that I can identify an apple tree by its fruit, Jesus said that you'll be able to identify his people by their fruit, by their qualities and their characteristics. So if you're a Christian in the room, then you and I are supposed to have these qualities that make other people, like, turn their heads and go, what is different about that person? It makes them turn their heads and go, they always act like fill in the blank, so they must be Christians. And the fill in the blank should be good stuff, which unfortunately, the truth is, most people fill in the blank with that person's self-righteous and hypocritical and judgmental, they must be a Christian. But Jesus says that we should have really good fill in the blanks, and it should make other people turn their heads. So when Jesus says that you'll recognize his people by their fruit, there's two things we got to understand real quickly, and then we'll move on. The first one is this. Jesus said his people will experience recognizable growth, not fake growth. All right, so fake growth is when you go, I promise, like in my heart and in my soul, I'm a totally different person. And then as you're claiming that, everyone around you who knows you well is like, no, you're not. You're the same. Fake growth is when you really are trying to convince yourself that you're an apple tree and everybody else sees a fence post, right? That's fake growth. Jesus said we'll have real growth, and it'll be recognizable. It'll be the thing where other people go, dude, you're different. So Jesus said we'll have recognizable growth. That's the first thing we need to understand. The other thing is, what should we be growing in? That's pretty important. If we're recognized by our fruit, what is our fruit? What is that supposed to look like? And Paul, a guy who wrote most of the New Testament, in a book called Galatians, he kind of explains this fruit for us, these qualities and characteristics that we're supposed to have, typically called the fruit of the Spirit, this passage, and it goes like this. The fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. Against such things, there is no law. All right, that's the whole series is based on that right there, all right? And if you combine the two together, what we're trying to deal with and wrestle through this series is the fact that if you've put your faith in Jesus, you should be recognizably growing in specifically all of those things. Love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, and self-control. That's what we're dealing with. So today, all I want to talk about is the first three descriptors, like the first three words that Paul uses to kind of describe this like complex taste of the fruit that's supposed to be growing in our lives. And it's love, joy, and peace. That's what we're going to talk about today. Love, joy, and peace. So if you're anything like me, when life is easy, when life is comfortable and life is good, like stuff at home is fine and work's been great, and my wife and I have gone on a date every single month, like nobody's died, the bills are paid, the car's not in the shop, when life is easy and comfortable, then I'm the first person to go like, yeah, love, joy, peace. Let's move on. I've got those three. I got those in spades, right? No problem. Pat myself on the back, pat Jesus on the back, high five, like we're great Christians. Let's keep going. But then if you're anything like me, when life gets hard, when it gets rough, when it gets scary and unknown and uncomfortable, meaning work is up in the air, stuff at home honestly kind of sucks. My wife and I haven't been on a date since January. My grandfather just died. Our car is dead in the driveway. I don't know how we're going to pay off taxes, let alone the bills this month. When life gets rough, then love, joy, and peace are the first three things out the window in my life. I feel like I don't have time for that, right? And I can justify it. It's like, no, I don't feel love, joy, and peace. I don't feel very loving right now. I don't have time for it. And I don't feel very joyful. I'm stressed, all right? My fuse is very short lately, and I don't feel peace. Life is chaotic and completely out of control. And so for me, love, joy, and peace are completely tied to my circumstances, like what's going on in my life, and my emotions. Probably for you too. What's interesting, though, is that the love, joy, and peace found in this fruit of the Spirit that Paul outlines in Galatians, they're technically not supposed to be tied to your circumstances or your emotions at all, ever. And I want to explain that real quick. So real quickly, I want to define like all three of these words, love, joy, and peace, from the original text. I did a Greek word study like a pastor, and I can't wait to share my results with you. Really, I went to Google, and I was like, sermons on love, joy, and peace. Not really. So love, here's love. This kind of love is a love that is an act of the will. It displays faithfulness and commitment to the object of your love. So this kind of love is not sappy, sentimental, first date, rom-com love, right? It's not fleeting and based on circumstances. It's also not the same thing like when you say, I love Asian food, right? Even though I really do. And if you haven't tried udon kaisha, you should go over here. I didn't take my pill long enough ago. Udon kaisha, moving on. Okay, love. Yeah, so it's not the same kind of love as I love Asian food or Chinese food, right? That's just like a pleasant reaction to something you enjoy. It's not that. Instead, this kind of love is an act of the will, all right? It's a result. It's not a result of your emotions. It's an act of the will. So this is actually why God can command it from you. And Jim brought this up to me a few days ago. I thought it was awesome. This is why he can command it from you, because it has nothing to do with your emotions or your feelings or your circumstances. You can't control any of those things. Instead, this is an act of the will. It's a choice you make, and he commands it of us. So that's love. Let's look at joy. Joy is this: a depth of spiritual assurance and confidence that ignites happiness, a deep down sense of well-being in the heart of someone who knows that all is well between them and God. So just like love, this kind of joy isn't based on circumstances. Instead, it's rooted in assurance, and it's rooted in confidence. So what that means is, regardless of your circumstances, in fact, good or bad, it's rooted in the confidence that God is going to protect you and he's going to provide for you. And you have a confidence that it then ignites joy. So this is the thing where I feel like everybody knows this person. Everyone has this person in their life. This is the thing where you know someone who they've had the hardest life of anyone you know, but then somehow, at the same time, they're also the most encouraging, like faithful and steadfast and happy and joyful people you've ever met. That's the kind of joy that Jesus will grow in our lives. And now peace. Here's peace. So peace is actually in this verse derived from a verb, and the verb means to join or bind together that which has been broken, divided, or separated. So it's an action, just like the other two. And it's an action that seeks to build wholeness, peace, and unity with others. That's all kind of a mouthful. Here's basically what it means. This kind of peace is not the kind where you would say, it's been a pretty peaceful day, because like at work, like there was really no conflict and stuff at home was pretty easy, pretty peaceful day. That's not this kind of peace. In fact, this kind of peace only has context. It literally can only exist in the middle of chaos and conflict. So this is peacemaking and not peacekeeping. It's a very important distinction. So peacekeeping is where you just don't want the symptoms to affect you, but honestly, you don't really care about the problem, right? Peacekeeping is doing everything in your power to avoid the difficult conversation that you feel like you have to have. That's peacekeeping. All right, peacemaking is something different, and this is what Jesus wants to grow in our lives. Peacemaking is where you do this crazy person thing, where you find, where's the chaos, where's the conflict, there it is, and then you step into it because you know that only peace is going to solve all of this chaos and conflict. This kind of peace is active, and it's not passive. And it seeks unity with people. It doesn't seek your own comfort. You'll probably take some bullets. And this isn't the kind of peace that whiners are begging for. This is the kind of peace that warriors just go out and make. And right away, the reason I define all three of those words for us is because that's not the kind of love, joy, and peace that we usually think about. It's completely different. And the important things for us are this. All three of them are choices you make. They're not feelings, they're not emotions, and they're not supposed to be tied to your circumstances. They're choices that you make. The other thing we need to understand this, and this is important for tonight or for today, is this. They don't come naturally to us. All right, these kinds of choices, this kind of other level love, joy, and peace, you don't just wake up one day and have it. They don't come naturally to us. If they're going to grow in our lives at all, it's only going to be because Jesus himself grew it for us. But then when he does, which he promised he would, when they do grow in our lives, it's the kind of thing, it's the real deal. It's recognizable good fruit. It's the kind of thing where other people look and go, there's something different about him. Something different about her, which is awesome. So what does this love, joy, and peace look like in real life? Well, for husbands in the room, any husband in the room, when you have this kind of committed, act of the will kind of love, that's when you find yourself going, you know what, even though life and work and the bills have been crazy, and even though all I want to do is go home and crash on the couch and watch the game, or actually all I want to do is go crash on this other woman's couch, even though that's all I really want to do right now, because life is hard, instead, I promise you, I'm going to sleep in our bed tonight and every single night. And tomorrow morning, even though stuff has been rough, I'm going to eat breakfast at our table tomorrow morning and every single morning because I'm not going anywhere. And I refuse to blame our distance on stress or a change of my heart or something like that. I refuse to entertain the idea of pursuing anybody other than you. Because I made a promise to you. This didn't mean I would stay with you as long as we made money and we never suffered tragedy and we both aged well. Right? That's not what this meant. This meant I'm not going anywhere. That's commitment. That's an act of the will kind of love. It's a choice you make. Or how about this? When a stay-at-home mom surrounded by screaming, dependent little kids has this kind of confident, assured joy. She starts going, you know what? I'm not gonna play the victim card today. I'm not gonna play the martyrdom of motherhood card. And even though life is nonstop and crazy, I'm changing diapers and then handing out goldfish and then putting Band-Aids on scraped knees and then I'm vacuuming up the same goldfish you just asked for. Why do they do that? It is infuriating, I'm realizing now. Can I have goldfish? Sure. And then, boom, vacuum. And then they're scared of the vacuum too. Oh gosh. Anyway, so when a mom has this kind of confident, assured joy, she goes, I choose not to see this good thing as a bad thing. And I refuse to view my kids as hassles and inconveniences. That's what it looks like in real life. Or students in the room, when you're 16-year-olds, you're in middle school or high school, whatever, and your parents are going through a divorce, and you have this kind of determined peacemaking. This is when you go, you know what? No, even though everything is out of my control right now, I'm not going to go to my room and put in my headphones and just zone out. That's peacekeeping. I'm going to be a peacemaker. I'm going to walk right into the conflict. I choose to love mom and dad the same way I did back before I found out about any of this. And I refuse to pick sides. And I refuse to use this as an excuse, as if I deserve now to cut class and party till I can't see straight or whatever. That's what this looks like in real life. It's the real deal. It's the kind of stuff that will make other people turn their heads and go, they are different. What would this look like in your life? For real, imagine it right now. So if you need to close your eyes, do it. I really want you to, for a second, in your head, imagine to yourself, what would this kind of love, joy, and peace, what might it look like in your stage of life right now? And then once you have what feels like a vague, kind of blurry, maybe abstract idea of what that might look like in your life if it were in action today, pull that into sharp focus and then realize the sometimes terrifying truth, which is if you've put your faith in Jesus, then you will grow more and more into that. And if you don't, or if it's been a while and you haven't, then something's wrong. Because there are only dead trees and alive trees, and you only know a tree is alive when it's growing. Now, if you're anything like me, hopefully you're not exactly like me, but if you're close, then you have this fleeting moment of excitement, right? Like you almost get to see the future version of yourself, like, is that what Jesus is going to do in my life? You get excited, and then after the brief moment of excitement, you slump back down into your chair because you know the truth better than anyone. The truth is that you're not there yet. And me neither, absolutely. And then if you think about that for too long, then as you start going down this like rabbit trail, this dark hole down and down and down where you reach a place where you go, wait a minute, am I actually growing at all? Like, am I growing in anything? Am I changing? It's a spiral. It gets defeating. I wouldn't be surprised if most of us in the room feel that way right now. We're just like, yeah, if I'm being honest, I don't think I'm changing. Like that kind of love, joy, and peace you're explaining, like I don't see that in my life. So what does that mean for me? We don't feel it. That's what I want to talk about now. Why don't we feel like Jesus is changing our lives? And honestly, there are only two reasons why you might not feel like Jesus is changing your life. One of them is a really hard truth reason. One of them is a really great grace reason. I have to start with the truth, though. So I know the weight of what I'm about to say. I understand it. I don't say it flippantly. I don't say it lightly. I'm only, in fact, going to say it to you because it's in the Bible, and I'm responsible as a teacher to tell it to you. But listen, please, I had people walk out, probably just to get their kids or something, and I'm in my head. I had people walk out after this part, and they didn't stay for the grace part. Stay for the next part. If you leave now, you're going to go, this is every church I've ever been to, and you're going to peace out. Please don't. Just stick around. Here's the hard truth piece. Let me set it up. This is Jesus himself speaking in John, which is a biography about his life. And he says this. He says, okay, so it's like this. I'm the true vine, and then my Father's the gardener. Okay, so he goes, God's taking care of all of us. And so for this story, I'm kind of like a vine in a vineyard. He goes, remain in me, and I will remain in you. So he goes, stay connected to me in relationship. I'm not going to back out on you. And he says, no branch can bear fruit by itself. It must remain in the vine. So that's common sense. He goes, well, if you cut a branch off the vine and throw it in the street, it's not going to grow grapes anymore. And then he says this. He goes, neither can you bear fruit unless you remain in me. He goes, I'm the vine, and you're the branches in this whole story. And he goes, if man or woman, if a person remains in me and I in him, then he'll bear much fruit. But apart from me, you can do nothing. Apart from me, you can do nothing. So Jesus says, listen, you can concentrate, you can try to like muster up on your own strength, your own power to like just force this kind of love, joy, and peace into existence. It's just not going to happen. Jesus said that would be as ridiculous, as silly as cutting a branch off of the vine in a vineyard, throwing it onto the street, and then waiting to see if it grows grapes next season. It's not going to. So Jesus says that this kind of fruit, this love, joy, peace, the other level stuff, only grows if we're connected to something way bigger than our own power. And that would be Jesus. But it leads us to a hard truth that we have to consider, which is this. You might not feel like you're growing because you're not. And then, just to rip the whole Band-Aid off real quick, and while we're at it, that leads us then to another even harder truth, which is this. The only reason that you wouldn't be growing in these other level versions of love, joy, and peace is if you aren't really in Jesus and if Jesus isn't really in you. I know, before you get furious at me for even suggesting it, I want you to hear one more time again. I only say that because it's biblical. That's my job now. And also, I'm not telling you that's the case for you. All right? I don't even feel like I have enough authority to get on stage and do this right now. I certainly don't have enough authority to figure out whether or not Jesus is alive and well in your life. I have no authority to do that. So when it comes to you having to wrestle through, trying to figure out, wait a minute, is it a potential that Jesus and his Spirit, and then therefore the fruit of his Spirit isn't present in my life? Is that a potential? When it comes time to wrestle through that, don't let any other human being ever tell you they have the authority to help you wrestle through that one. That's between you and God. But listen, I'm only telling you this because Jesus himself said it, and it's important. I believe it's like the life and death important stuff, all right? And I'm also not going to have my first time on the teaching team up here be the kind of thing where I peacekeep with you, right? Where I skirt around the hard stuff because it's like I'm not going to do that. So our big truth is this. You might not feel like you're growing because you're not. You're not growing. You've been trying to go it alone. You are the branch in the middle of the road. You're trying to muster up the strength to grow grapes. It's not going to happen. And what's more, you've probably been beating yourself up for it, right? You probably feel guilty. You probably feel mad at yourself all the time going like, why am I not strong enough to fix myself? Live in guilt and shame over it all the time. The truth is this can be so easily corrected. The biggest problem in your life has the easiest fix. It's just snap back to reality. Quit blaming yourself for not being strong enough to fix yourself. It was never your job in the first place. And then go reattach yourself to something that is strong enough to fix you. I'm telling you from my life, it's Jesus. It's the only one. So now, I've almost had the whole water. That's the hard truth. But this is the good part. So before everyone leaves the room, and I wrote the talk, and if I ended it there, even I would leave the room feeling this way, where you're going like, I thought I was good, right? Like I thought I had Jesus living inside of me, but at the same time, like the kind of love, joy, and peace that you're talking about is like, I don't know if I see that in my life right now, so what's wrong? Am I good? Do I have to get rebaptized? How do you do that at this church? Is there a form online? Where's the app or whatever? Before you start spiraling, it's time for the grace part, which goes like this. You might not feel like you're growing, but you are. And let me explain. See, so Jesus was smart, and he was so smart to talk about vines and trees and branches and fruit all the time with us. It's smart because he's pointing to a truth that you and I might miss, because I'm assuming that most of us are not farmers and gardeners by trade right now, right? And it's this unspoken, common sense truth that growth takes time. Growth takes time. Write it down, write it on your arm in Sharpie, tattoo it on your forehead. Growth takes time. Don't tattoo it on your forehead. You'll never get a job in a normal workforce. Sharpie's a good idea. Growth takes time. It just does. That's true. We know that. So when Jesus compares our growth to vines and fruit and plants and seeds, which he does all the time, it's implied that our growth will probably happen at about the same rate as trees and plants and vines and seeds. It won't happen overnight. In other words, the kind of love, joy, and peace that I'm talking about will not grow to full maturity overnight, like the second you put your faith in them. It just won't. It'll take years and years and seasons and seasons. You're going to have to go through a lot of winters before that thing grows to full maturity. We just forget that, right? That's fine. We all do. I do. Right? So we all do the spiritual version of every single New Year's resolution Ben Foot has ever made to go to the gym. So I always have this moment in December where I look in the mirror and I'm like, dang, dude, you are just so scrawny. You should go to the gym. Like, you should eat protein powder and all the stuff that all those people do. And then I do, and I go to the gym, and I do it for like 2 weeks until I look in the mirror and I go, wait a minute, I don't look like Tom Hardy yet. Now, I'm a little bit obsessed with, he's Bane from Batman, in case anyone doesn't know. I'm just obsessed with him. But I'm like, I don't look like Tom Hardy yet, so what's wrong? And I lose hope and I quit. I gave it 2 weeks. The spiritual version of this would be you got baptized, right? And maybe in a hot tub here or one of our campuses, or maybe when you were 8, I was 10, right? Or maybe at your other church, whatever. You got baptized and you told yourself, right now, starting right now in this moment, my whole life is going to be different. Everything's going to change. But then, days later, weeks later, real life reared its ugly head, right? I've had this experience, and you started to realize that all your old habits and addictions and thought patterns and your go-tos, those things aren't going to go down without a fight. And then once you had like the fear of that, they started winning some fights. And then before you knew it, you started to look like old you. And so you convinced yourself of a conclusion which goes like this. You said, I guess the whole faith, Jesus, Christianity, Bible thing isn't real in my life. And honestly, that's probably on me. I'm probably doing something wrong. Or you came to the conclusion where you go, you know what, God's obviously just too busy, like making sure the earth spins it at the correct axis or whatever. Like, he's too busy to deal with me. Or maybe he's not, but he's certainly not powerful enough. I guess he's just weak. And then some of us jump to the conclusion that I came to about a decade ago, and I'm not there anymore, but it's the conclusion I came to about 10 years ago, which is this. See, this is the proof. This is the proof that this is a fairy tale for weak people who need to believe that there's a God who loves them. It's for weak people. It's not real. And the proof is that my life doesn't look any different. But what if what's really going on is that we bought into this myth, all right? This lie that we thought we were supposed to become completely different husbands and wives and sons and daughters and CEOs and employees, whatever, you name it. We thought we were supposed to become completely different right away. It's like we bought into our culture of instant gratification, right? Amazon Prime and Netflix and Uber Eats and Spotify. In our culture of you deserve whatever you want and you deserve it now. We thought that applied to the growth that Jesus wants to bring into our lives. We wanted our big real life change now. And then when we didn't get it, we jumped to the conclusion that Jesus must be out of order or out of date. But in the end, what if all that is going on is that we forgot? We forgot that everything in life, and you know this, especially the good stuff, especially the important stuff, everything in life is this metaphor, like from our marriage to our kids, and then even down to trees and vines and branches and grapes. It's this metaphor for this fundamental truth that growth takes time. And so also, just so you don't think I'm speculating up here, right? Like drawing some weird conclusion. In another part of the Bible, this truth is just outright stated for us, and it goes like this. The he, and this is Jesus, he who began a good work in you will carry it on to completion until the day of Christ Jesus. So he who began a good work in you will carry it on to completion until the day of Christ Jesus. Jesus began a good work in you. He didn't finish it yet. He's not done with us. That's important. And even the finishing part, you don't even have to worry about that. He's got it. He will carry it on to completion, but it's going to take time. He's going to be doing that until the day that you die. Growth takes time. And in fact, this is a concept that is actually a Christian doctrine. You're being taught doctrine right now. This is all that it means is a fancy way of saying, like, we think this is so important to be a pillar and to never go away. We have to remind people of this. And the churchy doctrinal word for this, which should only ever be used when pastors talk to other pastors, is sanctification. Does that make me sound legit? It's sanctification. The normal person, the normal Flatiron's way of saying this is that growth takes time. So this, oh man, I'm so fired up. So this is not, I will never do this from stage, I promise. It's a vow. This isn't some lukewarm, fuzzy, tingly, self-help, prosperity-driven, mega church, Jesus is your psychiatrist kind of message. It's doctrine. This is the gospel. It's the good news of Jesus Christ. It's the only banner that every Christian should ever fly. Like, it's the only battle cry that every Christian should ever have where they shout the truth. And the truth is this: I'm so screwed up that God himself has to fix me. And it's even taking him my whole life. That's all it is. Growth takes time, takes forever. Well, we forgot that. And so because of that, because growth takes time, please make sure you're not doing this. Don't confuse slow and steady growth for no growth at all. Don't do it. I mean, the truth is sometimes our own recognizable change that Jesus has brought into our lives is not immediately recognizable for us. Let me explain that. So, a workout program, right? So every workout program that you have ever started and completed and I've ever started and quit, every single workout program tells you to do the same thing. Take before and after pictures. Why? Because we have to be able to recognize our own change. It might be recognizable to everybody else in the gym, but not to you, because you have to live with yourself day in and day out. Like, slow and steady growth is hard to see when you're looking at it in the mirror every single day. This is why when we were kids, right, we used to get a pencil and, like, on a wall somewhere, every time we grew, we'd mark a little dash and put a date on it. And the reason we did that is because we desperately needed to know it was happening. Right? And even if you just marked like 1/8 of an inch, which, side note, is like the rate I grew for 2 years and then God quit. But even if you grew just like a teeny tiny amount, like you only experienced this almost imperceptible change, you still marked it and you put a date on it and you got excited because it meant you could step back and see dash after dash and you knew it's happening. I'm growing. And we forget that. When it comes to spirituality, we just forget. Don't forget anymore. The truth is this: sometimes we need help recognizing our own recognizable growth. That's just true. And so here's what I think we should do this week. I'm excited about this. It's awesome. It's actually terrifying and terrible, but it's great. So, like, if you do this, it really is scary. And actually, I feel I promise it's awesome. My wife, Allie, did this with me last night. It's awesome. So, this is me reining it back in. Here's what I think you should do individually. When is the last time, or have you even ever, looked at someone? Find the right person. This is important. So go find someone who knows you well, has known you for a long time. Find someone that you trust, and then find someone who, this is the one you have to, integrity, you got to find this person, someone who will be honest with you. All right? find that person. When is the last time you've ever asked someone like that and gone, hey, might sound weird, but do I seem any different? Like, can you please point to one, just give me one specific area of my life where you can see that Jesus is like changing me. I just need a win. I need to know. When's the last time you've done that? What's stopping you now? What's stopping you for real? For like 8 minutes now or whatever, from when you're in the car with your spouse, what's stopping you from asking? What's stopping you from, like, instead of going home watching Netflix or going out to eat, whatever your plans were after this, just put it off for 10 minutes. And before you even leave the lobby, you can make the phone call. What's stopping you? And I'm not dumb, right? I know what's stopping you. It's the same thing that was stopping me. It's the very real fear that you're going to make that phone call, you're going to be in the car or whatever, and they're going to look back at you and go, right? That would be the worst response. You go, yeah, I'll get back to you. Like, that would be bad. But listen, even if that happened, so even if someone looks back at you and they say, no, I don't see any change, isn't it worth it to know? So what I mean is, like, if you're the kind of person that you're interested in Jesus, you want to put your faith in Jesus, isn't it worth it to know that maybe you're not growing? Like, isn't it maybe worth it to know that you've been the branch on the road all alone trying to fix yourself? Isn't that maybe worth it? And this is just logic. So if you're the kind of person who's you've grown up in church, you've been to church for like 50 years, or you're the kind of person who this is your first time here today, welcome. If wherever you are on the spectrum, this is logic. If this whole Jesus, Bible, God, faith thing is real, if it's real, it's the most important thing going on in the world. It's important enough to get right. So even if you hear a no, isn't it worth it to know and get this part of your life right? And then in case you do get a no, just because I already feel like tender for anyone in the room who's going to get a no, let me soothe the wound early, all right? So if receiving a no feels like you got sucker punched in the gut and it puts you in a place where you're going, oh no, I'm the branch alone on the road, and if it feels terrible and you come to this conclusion of like, I have to fix this part, I have to go reattach myself to the vine. Here's what I would call that. Here's what I would call this, I'll do whatever it takes to make sure I stay connected to Jesus kind of decision. I would call it an act of the will, committed version of love, which would mean right away, you're not the branch on the road alone anymore. And then on the other hand, if you get a no, if you get a yes from someone, you go, hey, am I growing at all? And they go, well, yeah, like, here's a couple I can list right away. If that happens, how is that not worth it? Like, isn't it worth it to know that, like, maybe, just maybe, Jesus is keeping his promise in your life to change you from the inside out? Isn't that worth it to know? I'm telling you, it's absolutely worth it, but I can't ask this question for you. I can't give you the courage to say that in the car. I can't give you the conviction to just make the phone call before you leave the freaking lobby. I can't do it. All I can do is share my experience with you, and I can tell you I did this with Allie a few weeks ago, and she did it with me last night, and it's good. It's so worth it. When Allie did this with me, it's like I needed to hear it. It's stuff I couldn't see that I was growing in, and it felt like I was 8 again, and I took a step back, and I could add one more dash and put a date on it and see dash after dash, and I don't care if I'm only growing a little bit over the last 6 years of me putting my faith in Jesus. I don't care. It's still proof that it's working. I'm growing. I'm different. I'm a different man than Allie married. Well, I just needed to know. So, here's where I want to end this thing, all right? It's an illustration. It's an illustration that I hope kind of visually solidifies this whole slow and steady growth thing, right? This whole growth takes time. Because honestly, I work this way, where you can sit there and you hear something and you're like, I think it makes sense, but it's not really until you see it, right? That you're like, oh, okay. I hope that does. So track with me here. So here's tree number 1, all right? This is tree number 1. This is an apple tree, actually. Well, according to the dude in overalls and a corncob pipe on the side of the road that we bought it from, this is an apple tree. We'll see. So it's an apple tree. It's not big enough to grow apples yet, right? But give it enough time. And then here's the very important part. If the right gardener is taking care of this tree, then eventually it'll be huge. Like 25 to 30 feet tall, apples every season. It'll survive every winter it ever faces. Your kids can go climb in its branches one day. All right, so that's tree number 1. Over here is tree number 2. This is tree number 2. All right? Tree number 2 is actually every bit as much an apple tree as tree number 1. It really is. Tree number 1 used to look like this. And at its roots, like at the DNA, its species, it is the same exact tree as tree number 1 and any other apple tree who's putting apples to market right now. And so here are my questions. I've got a few questions for you. First one is this. Is this tiny little sprig in a pot at the DNA, at its roots, every bit the same as this tree over here? Yes. That happened last night too, where they're like, when does a tree become a tree? Was it the chicken or the egg? Yeah, it's the same exact thing. It's the same species. Now, big truth question, all right? Big truth. If the right gardener is taking care of this tiny little tree, should it be exactly the same size next year? No. It should have grown. Because the only sign of health for a tree is if it's growing. But now a big grace question. If the right gardener is taking care of this tree, should this little tree feel ashamed that it's not like right now as big as tree number 1? No, it's not even responsible for its own growth. It's at the mercy of the gardener. And then last question, all right? And for a second, just try to pull yourself like out of the metaphor for a minute, you know, where you're going like, am I the little tree? Am I the what tree am I? And how? Pull yourself out of the metaphor. Just answer this question like you would have in 3rd grade science class. Are both of these trees right now growing currently in front of your eyes, even though you can't see it? Absolutely. Why? Because growth takes time. It just takes time. And our awesome truth is this. If we have the right person taking care of us, and I guarantee you that Jesus is absolutely the right person, then growth will happen in your life. It will. It's just going to take time. And he promised it, and he keeps his promises. Remember that verse. He says, he who began a good work in you, he who began a good work in you will carry it into completion. That verse does not say you had better start a good work in yourself and you had better carry it on to completion if you want to be a good little Christian and go to heaven when you die. It doesn't say that. It says, he who began a good work in you will, I promise you, he will carry it into completion. He keeps his promises. This means he started the growth and he'll carry it all the way done until it's done. Until the day you're dead, you're going to be a different person than you used to be. And even though somehow the truth seems so simple and easy to recognize when we're looking at trees in pots on a stage, we forget the truth for ourselves, which is this. If you have put your faith in Jesus, he made you a promise that he won't back out on, which is this. He promises you are currently in your seat right now as we speak, growing, even if you can't see it in the mirror today. I promise. He promises. And that's good news. It's just that we forgot that growth takes time. So here's what I want to do. I'm going to pray. When I pray, I say amen. We're not going to sing another song. Instead, there's just going to be, the lights are going to be down. There's going to be these 2 trees lit on the stage. And here's what I want you to do. When I say amen, if you need to stick around for a little bit, then stick around. If you need to ask God himself, like, are you fixing me? Then do that here. It's going to be quiet and dark. You can do that here. If you are the person that's like, I'm the branch on the road, Like I have been trying my whole life to fix myself, and I've been mad at myself that it's not working. If that's you, we're going to have people at the front that you can come up and they'll pray for you. But I'm going to say amen, and we're immediately going to go home. And here's what I'm going to pray for. I'm going to pray for some courage and some wisdom to go ask the right person the question, which is there one specific area in my life where you can see any sort of change? Pray with me. Jesus, you promised, and I am a person, and a lot of the people in this room were people who were banking our entire life on your promises. And one of the promises you made is that you'll begin a good work in us, and not only that, that you will take full responsibility for growing it into completion. But we live with ourselves every day. We have to look in the mirror at ourselves every single day, and it's hard to see the growth sometimes. So God, what I'm asking for everyone in this room, I'm asking for wisdom and discernment. Please help us to figure out who should we ask this to? Who can we trust that will be honest with us? And then God, I'm praying for courage, because the truth is, like, we're going to walk out of this room and we got to pick up our kids, and then we already told someone we go to lunch and we got a barbecue after dinner or whatever. Like, we got a lot of stuff going on, and by the time we think about this again, it'll be nighttime and we will have lost the courage. And so God, I'm praying for us to keep the courage to just go out and ask this question to someone. God, I thank you for being who you are. You could be anything and we would have to worship you, but you're good and you're great. And you're the kind of God who steps into our lives and goes, I'm going to start something in you, I promise. I promise you're not even going to recognize yourself a decade from now. And you keep that promise, and I'm thankful for that. Give us wisdom and give us courage. I love you, and I pray this in your Son's name, Jesus Christ. Amen. Glad you were here. I'm glad you're here. Walk out, keep growing.
We're so glad you joined us today, and it's our honor and our mission to help you keep discovering Jesus in a real and authentic way. So if you need prayer right now, we'd love to provide that. Simply head to flatirons.church.com/prayer, and you can know that we and our team of volunteers will be praying for you throughout the week. We'd also love to hear about the awesome things Jesus is doing in your life. You can always share your story by emailing us at mystory@flatironschurch.com. And last, if you'd like to play a role in what God is doing here at Flatirons, you can always donate to our mission at flatironschurch.com/give online. Thanks again for joining us here at Flatirons, and we'll see you next week.